Which quarterback ranked outside of the top 12 in ADP has a chance to finish within the top 5? That and so much more coming up on tonight's episode of the Mailbag Show. Jeff Bell, start us off here. Which quarterback ranked outside of the top 12 do you think can finish in the top 5?
As badly as I want to go with Justin Fields for this answer, I think it's pretty easy layup that you have to go with Trey Lance. When you look at the weapons that are around Trey Lance, having Deebo Samuel, having George Kittle, having Brandon Ayuk, we know the publicist Deebo doesn't want to have that running back role. And so if Trey Lance is kind of throwing him short passes, using him in the intermediate passing game, treating him more as a wide receiver, that's only going to be value to Trey Lance. But I have to go with a rushing running back just because we know the math on a rushing running back. And you know, if Trey Lance picks up 60 yards per game, that's like 150 passing yards, and 200 passing yards is pretty easy to get to. So my choice is Trey Lance, mainly based upon the weapons around him and his rushing ability.
Now, I feel like I have to take this opportunity as well to plug Footballguys ADP. You know, over the last few months on this show, we've been using Underdog ADP, and Underdog ADP is fantastic. But now as we're getting a little bit closer to redraft season, we're going to start leaning on Footballguys ADP. We have our own proprietary formula to make our own ADP. It uses a mix of Sleeper, Underdog, MFL, ESPN, CBS, you name it. We bring in a ton of different sources to formulate this ADP. And you know, best ball is pretty sharp when you're drafting early in the year, but you do get, you know, guys with upside get pushed up quite a bit. And then you've got guys like Gabe Davis and Mike Williams that are looking pretty wild with those ADPs because people are really chasing the stacks on those heavy offenses. So going forward, we will be using Footballguys ADP on this show. You can find that at footballguys.com/ADP, where right now Trey Lance is ranked as the QB 12. Victoria, same question to you though. What quarterback outside of the top 12 in ADP has a chance to finish in the top 5?
I took a look. There's two guys that as much as I want to vouch for to someone like Mac Jones, LOL, JK, I feel like there are only a couple of guys I can vouch for this question. One I've already talked about on the Mailbag Show previously, just a couple weeks ago, Derek Carr. I do like Derek Carr for this upcoming season. We're showing him at QB 14 right now for Footballguys ADP. I've already hit on a couple of these things, so I'll go quickly. But, I mean, he's in, I think, one of the most insanely talented and upgraded divisions in the entire NFL, in my opinion, right now. There's shootout potential galore there with Broncos adding Russell Wilson. Of course, we all love Justin Herbert. And I still think Patrick Mahomes is going to get it done in Kansas City without Tyreek. That's a ton of games just right there. And the addition of Devontae Adams, I think, is going to allow Carr to outperform his ADP alone. Past 3 years, Devontae's been number one in receiving yards per game at almost 93 yards per game, almost 4,000 total yards, 34 receiving touchdowns. This guy's a red zone monster. We already know. I'm already saying things we know. Darren Waller, Hunter Renfrow, they're not going away. These guys are incredible pass catchers as well. I like Carr a lot for this season. Another guy, though, I don't know, Dave, if you're going to answer this as well. I do want to hit on Kirk Cousins because there's been a lot of talk over the last week or so about Kirk and this Minnesota offense. I'll start with he's been QB 11 overall the last 2 years. And I think he's done that quietly and underrated. Now, if we're talking about Kirk getting it done for fantasy, not can he win them games and take them to the playoffs. I'm not going to speak to that. I don't think he has that killer mentality to do so, but we'll talk fantasy. A lot of talk lately. The Vikings are no longer a run-first team. They've got their new OC, Kevin O'Connell. They're leaving old Zimmer behind. They're changing their ways. All this talk about being an air raid offense going forward. There's talk. Justin Jefferson was just gushing about this to NFL.com. Adam Thielen on the Pat McAfee show. It's everywhere. Everyone's really, really excited. So I decided to look a couple of things up for this particular question. For the first 7 games back in 2018, Kirk Cousins was doing pretty good. He was throwing for over 300 yards per game. He had 14 total touchdowns, only 3 interceptions. Really great completion rate at 70%. This is back, I don't know if you guys remember, it brought me back to when Thielen was inching toward that NFL record for 100-yard games consecutively.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking back to that. Was that the last time we were all happy, with all this COVID and crazy stuff? But anyway, I digress. But they've been run first since then, and I'm wondering if their new OC can maximize Cousins' potential. Justin Jefferson has been a beast, and they haven't even focused on him in their offense as like a Devontae Adams type player. So I just think that he's got a really good chance. They're only middle of the pack in terms of strength of schedule for difficulty. Not too hard, not too easy. Their O-line improved outside of their center, but definitely improved for him to have more time to throw. And I do still believe in Adam Thielen. Let's point that out too. I don't think the Vikings are going into this season knowing or seeing any clear signs of significant regression from Thielen, and they're still going to go and bank on him. I have confidence in him there. So I'm excited for what Kirk can do this year.
Yeah, and I mean, we saw what Kevin O'Connell turned Cooper Kupp into last year. Now he's got Justin Jefferson. Why wouldn't we expect similar usage going Justin Jefferson's way when he is just as good, if not better, of a receiver than Cooper Kupp? And the other thing I wanted to point out, I actually just came across this morning, and I haven't heard anybody really talk about it. But Kevin O'Connell, he's been in the league for a little while now. He's bounced around a little bit. Kirk Cousins' final year in Washington, Kevin O'Connell was his quarterback coach. So it's not like Kevin O'Connell is coming into a situation where he's got a new quarterback that he needs to mold. You already know some of Kirk's tendencies, and you got to think that it's pretty intentional for him to sign with Minnesota, knowing that he already has a history with Kirk Cousins. So that's something to look into. I'll take the easy one here, since nobody else wanted to talk about him. You guys both kind of tiptoed around it a little bit. But Justin Fields, for a lot of the same reasons that you said Trey Lance, Jeff, we saw this last year with Jalen Hurts. An offense that isn't really, or a team that isn't projected to be over 500, but you've got a quarterback that's going to be playing a lot in garbage time and racking up a lot of points on the ground. And it seems like we see these types of guys almost every single season. We saw it last year with Jalen Hurts. We saw it the year before with Deshaun Watson, where quarterbacks on mediocre teams go into the fourth quarter with 6, 7, 8 fantasy points and then somehow finish the game with 25, 28. I could see that type of season from Justin Fields. If you look at his last 4 starts, he was averaging over 65 yards per game. Comes out to over 1,000 yards on the season, which is Lamar Jackson-esque. Not saying that it's going to happen, but that is his ceiling, and he's got that rushing upside. So the only reason I'm talking about Justin Fields is because Jeff already talked about Trey Lance, but those are the two guys that I think that you bet on a little bit later in your draft. Maybe you partner them up with somebody who's a little bit safer. We talked Kirk Cousins, Derek Carr. Maybe you double tap quarterbacks in the late rounds, end up with 2 of those guys in case one of the rookies or the second-year guys doesn't work out. But this is a year where I think you can say there are 16 QB1s. It's not, you've got your clear cut 5 or 6 guys up top, but realistically, quarterbacks are deep this year. If there was ever a year to wait on quarterbacks, it's 2022. Anyway, I want to thank everybody for tuning into another episode of the Mailbag Show. Troy cannot make it this evening, so we are joined again with Football Guys' own Jeff Bell, as always with Victoria as well. Victoria, why don't you let everyone know where they can find you on social media, what you've got going on? We have been cranking out content over at Football Guys. Not sure if you've had a chance to do any of the roundtable stuff, but man, those are coming out, a few a day at this point.
I missed them. I know I just talked to Clayton today. I will be joining the next round. Yeah, I can't wait to contribute to those. But yes, you can find me at FFB_Victoria on Twitter and Instagram. Make sure you're checking out footballguys.com and Football Guys on the YouTube page. There are videos every single day. We are getting closer and closer to redraft season. I cannot wait. And Dave, you've been doing a lot of great best ball stuff too, so make sure you plug that. I've been checking those out. So I'm still a little bit of a rookie on the best ball.
And I was last year, dipped my toes in a little bit, but had some fun, made a little bit of money. And this year I decided I'm going 100% into it. Got to check out the show that I'm doing with James Brimacone on Tuesday afternoons. It's a ton of fun. We draft a best ball team live. And what we do is we auto pick the first 5 rounds, which is so crazy to even think about doing, but it really pushes us out of our comfort zone, forces us to get some guys that we wouldn't typically draft. And then we kind of work around it. So it's really fun to kind of see our gears turning in our head and trying to figure out how to build a team off of a start that we would probably never pick. We just did a super flex draft where we ended up with Matthew Stafford and Jameis Winston auto picked as our QB 1 and 2. And that was fun to work around. But before we get into the show, Jeff, let everyone know where they can find you. This is your second week in a row now on the Mailbag Show. Welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me again. I appreciate it greatly. Anytime I can join you guys on the show, I am always here and down and ready to go. You can find me on Twitter at For Whom J Bell Tolls, the number 4. And you can find me with Football Guys. I'm putting up a lot of written content. I've got spotlights out already on Breece Hall, on Tyreek Hill, and on Austin Eckler. So I know that's one of your guys, Victoria. So I hope you check that one out. And then also contributing with the roundtables. That's one of my favorite things to do. We are able to get in there. We are able to pick whatever players you want to talk about and kind of take an interesting angle on them. So we've always got so much content coming out with footballguys.com. Make sure to continue to check it out. And that Spotlight series is my absolute favorite thing we do all year long, because that really gives you a platform to deep dive on a player and look at all the different angles and try to evaluate, are you high on this player? Are you low on this player? And where versus ADP are you able to win on this player?
Yeah, and I think those deep dives are a lot of fun. Last year, I went into an article thinking, I'm going to write about how A.J. Brown is a top 3 receiver. And then I started digging into the data, and I was like, wait, I am way lower on A.J. Brown than I thought I'd be. I ended up completely changing my stance by the time I'd finished this article. So definitely want to check those out. Ton of fun this time of year, but let's go ahead and dive right in. Next question comes in from another football guy, Sam Wagman, and he is saying, can we expect Tyrion Davis Price to step into the Jeff Wilson role and be a weekly option in your flex spot? He might vulture goal line work. Victoria, start us off here. What are we interpreting with this question?
I mean, we've been on a redraft lens, right? So I'm going to stick to that. If we're talking and sticking to redraft, I just simply cannot fathom this happening at a significant early point in the year. We've seen year after year, it is always the hot hand for the 49ers. It is so hard to decipher who it's going to be week in and week out, not just, who's here for the next couple of weeks. So deciding on my own from the last couple of years of trying to figure out who's going to lead this backfield, it's always hurt me more than it's helped me. I've made the wrong decision trying to figure out who it's going to be for that week and trying to win that matchup. Of course, I expect this guy to get work, but when? It's going to be when an injury happens, goal line work, as Sam mentioned here in this question. I don't, from a redraft lens, I'm just not excited. I'm never really excited, especially a lot of us were burned last year with Trey Sermon. I don't know what happened, but the fantasy community, we didn't listen hard enough to the 49ers beat reporters, because they were banging the drum for Elijah Mitchell, and we were just plumping up Trey Sermon's ADP to that. I don't want to say this phrase, but running back dead zone last year. It was a really, really bad pick that bit a lot of us. So I'm out for redraft. Of course, Dynasty is a different lens here. I don't know if we want to get into that, but
I gotta say, man, the 49ers beat is just awful. Like with those writers, they don't know a thing what's going on inside the organization. Last year, they tell us, Trey Sermon's gonna be the guy, and Kyle Shanahan's dead set on drafting Mac Jones. This year, here we are. It is June 29th, and we don't even know who the starting quarterback is going to be week 1. I mean, I don't know what's going on in the San Francisco beat, but come on, guys, get it together. Get some actual information rather than just throwing opinions out there. Jeff, same question to you, though. Tyrion Davis Price, can he step into the Jeff Wilson role?
So can he be the goal line back and be a flex option? I'm very skeptical. We only had 2 games last year where 2 running backs for the 49ers touched the ball at least 10 times. I know there's some unpredictability, and we're feeling burnt on Elijah Mitchell last year. And we really didn't have an indicator from the beat writers, because there was that report, if you remember way back in week 1, all of a sudden Trey Sermon was inactive for the game. And that was a shock week 1. And that led to a flurry of moves before that game started off. When they find a guy, they go with him. Now, the thing with Elijah Mitchell, he's fast. He hits the hole. He is not a polished runner, and he's not a technique runner. He is going to go directly where you tell him it's blocked, stick his foot in the ground, cut up field, and get what he can. The problem is he's a 200 plus pound. He's a smaller back. He's closer to 200 pounds. The wear and tear we saw last year, that added up, and that took him out of the game. They brought Davis Price in because they wanted to minimize that role in Deebo Samuel in the run game. The problem with that is Trey Lance is going to pick up some role in the run game more than what Jimmy Garoppolo had last year. And so I think that if you're looking for the goal line back, it might just be Trey Lance. And they might kind of devise packages so that they spread people out, give Trey Lance an RPO maybe at the goal line, and he takes it in, and that might be your goal line back. But, yeah, flex options out of the 49ers backfield, when they show you that there's a guy, you go with that guy, and you don't mess around with any other options, and you don't play but I absolutely grab pieces. Grab Davis Price if you believe in that talent. I think there's absolute reason why it could break his way. If Mitchell misses time, he could get involved. There is a chance that maybe they diversify the run game a little bit and use both of them. My concern there is you're going to have two guys that you probably can't play versus having one guy that you can't play. And so
Right.
that's kind of where the concern comes in, because they don't use the running back in the passing game. And they're especially not going to if Deebo Samuel is kind of transitioning more out of that and they have a running quarterback.
Yeah, so I think Tyrion Davis Price, I mean, the one thing he has going for him is high top end speed. And that's the one thing that really makes a difference in this scheme. If you can get to the outside and, like you said, just plant that foot and cut up field with some bursts, that's how you can maintain that role. And he can do that well. And the problem that we saw last year with Elijah Mitchell, and so many people think because Elijah Mitchell stepped up so early in the season that he was supposed to be the guy, but completely forget the fact that it was actually Raheem Mostert who was the guy. And then he just happened to get injured like the first quarter of week 1. And then Elijah Mitchell stepped in with the role. But yeah, Tyrion Davis Price, he's not a guy that I'm going out of my way to get, but he's also getting drafted so cheap right now. Like you can get him after Alexander Madison and Isaiah Spiller and Khalil Herbert. And kind of like after that big run of handcuffs go, Tyrion Davis Price is a pretty nice consolation prize that you can get a little bit later that could see some work if something were to happen to Elijah Moore. Next question comes in, still about the 49ers backfield. Like I said, this beat isn't helping us at all, so we are just speculating on our own. And Andrew Hall asked us, thoughts on Trey Sermon? Is he worth rostering in a 30-plus spot league? Jeff, start us off here.
A league that deep with a running back that young that had a day 2 capital on him, I think he's still worth rostering. Trey Sermon is a good running back. He's just not a scheme fit for the 49ers. And part of me wonders that once they get Davis Price in camp and they're starting to feel pretty good about that pick, feeling good about Mitchell, if Trey Sermon might end up as a trade candidate. And yeah, I think Atlanta would be an interesting fit for Trey Sermon, where he's a bigger, more physical back, and you kind of throw him in there. They drafted Tyler Algier, but kind of mix those guys up. That might be a good fit. But looking around the league, if somebody goes down, if Derrick Henry were to go down, then maybe Trey Sermon could step in there. It was just not a scheme fit. It was a curious pick. And I know our Matt Waldman was very high on Trey Sermon, but he said right after the draft, this was a terrible landing spot for Trey Sermon. And so that is the biggest thing. He's a talented running back. He's got size. He's got physicality. He's polished. He played a high level of football in college. It's just one of those things that he's not the right organization.
Yeah, very much so a square peg in a round hole here. Victoria, what are your thoughts on Trey Sermon? I mean, 30-plus spots. I mean, you're rostering everybody at that point.
Yeah, I have Jeff really covered that really well with that answer. I'm in the same camp, and you can't not roster him with a bench spot that deep. But to me, what you guys said too before, once they show you who he is, it is what it is. Not that he could not have success on another team, but again, will he just be hopping around now if he starts getting traded and just being the backup or maybe a bye week fill-in or some kind of flyer for your injuries? Yeah, fine. But goodness, this is someone who you're probably just tacking on to a trade too, just to sweeten the pot, baby, with Trey Sermon. I mean, I don't have hope. Of course, I'm sure roster him if it's that deep. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, with Elijah Mitchell, Tyrion Davis Price, Deebo Samuel, Trey Lance, I mean, Sermon realistically is probably going to be 5th in rushes this year. So there isn't really much of an opportunity in San Francisco. If you're holding on to him, you're really hoping that he's just going to end up on a different team. But we got another question here from Andrew Hall. And here we are almost 20 minutes into the show, and we're finally done talking about the 49ers. Andrew Hall asks us, how long until Kenny Pickett takes over the QB job from Mitch Trubisky, or is Mitch their guy all year long? Victoria, Pickett, Mitch, do you think we see a change midseason? What are we supposed to make of this Steelers offense?
Goodness gracious. I think this is Mitch's job for the year. I think what I've been reading based on Steelers beat reporters, the rumblings, Kenny Pickett I read recently, it's a serious long shot that he's going to unseat Trubisky as their quarterback one. And I've been reading that he's taking reps with the third stringers. I mean, if you're supposedly on track to unseat Mitch, you're not taking limited first team reps in camp. So, I mean, of course, if Mitch gets hurt, there's injury, God forbid, Pickett's going to be thrust into that role, but I just don't see it happening. I want to hit on, Mitch was on the Bills last year. He probably had a lot of valuable insight from the coaching staff, from watching Josh Allen, being able to be around him and to at least improve in some ways from where he was before he landed with the Bills. He has a really reputable, sound surrounding cast now in his wide receiver weapons and Najee in the backfield to boost his numbers. To me, there's no way Mitch can possibly be worse than my least favorite Big Ben last year, and I just think it's his time, and the reports are not looking good coming out of camp for Pickett to be starting.
Yeah, I mean, if there's anywhere that Mitch Trubisky can bounce back, it's definitely under Mike Tomlin. But this definitely does feel like a classic case of just, Mitch Trubisky thinking he's getting the job and then all of a sudden becoming a bridge quarterback. We see this time and time again where a veteran lands a job early in the offseason and we think, yes, he's going to get his chance. I mean, we could have the same exact conversation right now with Mariota and Desmond Ritter, where, we thought Mariota was going to be the guy. And now we got Desmond Ritter breathing on the back of his neck, not really sure how that's going to shake out. I am kind of with you where I expect Mitch to be the guy all season. Tomlin, if there's any coach in the NFL that has job security, I mean, Tomlin could go winless for the next 5 years and he still wouldn't lose his job in Pittsburgh. So he's not on any sort of hot seat where he feels the need to trot out this rookie early. He's going to, be patient and really take his time developing Pickett. So I think we see Mitch all year long outside of an injury. Jeff, what are your thoughts?
I'm going to go the other way. I want to play contrarian on this one. So
you've first round rookie. I get it.
He's a first-round rookie pick. And Matt Canada, the offensive coordinator, spent about 30 years of his career in college. So he's very comfortable with young quarterbacks. Kenny Pickett's a Pittsburgh guy. He played in that very stadium in college. I think it's one of these that maybe you're starting him with the third team to kind of ease him into the team. But, as they're together, if Mitch is ahead of him and stays ahead of him, then Mitch is going to play. But I think that if they pull even or if Kenny Pickett goes in front at all, I think they're going to roll him out there. I really do, because this is the polished guy. He played in college for 5 years. And this isn't a young kid that came out after his junior year and he might have sat a year or two. This is a guy that has been a starter for 4 or 5 seasons in Pittsburgh. And Matt Canada is very comfortable with going with a young quarterback, just like I mentioned. So I'm going to roll the dice here. And I think that Kenny Pickett's going to take this job before week 1.
Before week 1. Wow.
Yeah,
that's bold right there.
Week 1. I think so. It's, I might be wrong, but I just think that there's a chance that this is an organization that if they believe in Kenny Pickett being the guy, I think that they're going to make that move.
Yeah. And I mean, they basically gave Mitch Trubisky backup money. I mean, he's getting $14 million over 2 years. That is not starter money. So it's possible. We'll see how this goes. But like Victoria said, it's pretty hard to, project him to be the week 1 starter when he's taking third team snaps right now. So we'll see if he can climb his way up that ladder throughout the offseason. Next question comes in here from our friend Craig, and he says, I'm in a 14-team single quarterback dynasty league, but people hoard quarterbacks like it is in Superflex. If anybody's played in these deep dynasty leagues before, that's how it goes. Realistically, you want 2 quarterbacks on your team, and that's 28 quarterbacks right there. That means, a few teams out there are really scraping the barrel. And Craig says, I'm near the end of a rebuild, and my team has Zach Wilson, Tua Tagovailoa, and Trey Lance. Which of the 3 would you trade away? I think this is a fantastic question because obviously they're valued very differently. So we got to kind of think conceptually here, who is probably the best to sell high at the current value. I'll start off with this one and then hand it off to one of you, but I'm going to go with Tua here just because I think Zach Wilson and Trey Lance at least have the job security for the next 3-ish years, where I don't know if Tua has that job security. He's already heading into year 3 on his contract. Miami has the draft capital where if Tua isn't looking good this year, they can pivot to a different quarterback next season. They've already made it very clear that they are in win now mode by giving 160 million, 120 million to Tyreek Hill. So this team is already putting the pedal to the metal. And if Tua can't show up this year and make a playoff run, I think this is the last that we see him as the starter in Miami. So I try to trade him right now because I think that his value is being propped up by everybody thinking he's got Jalen Waddle, he's got Tyreek Hill, he's got Mike McDaniels. I think that there's a very good chance that his value plummets out from underneath him, where you've got some insulation with Zach Wilson and Trey Lance, knowing that they've probably got at least 3 years left as a starter. Jeff, why don't you go ahead and help us out with this one? Zach Wilson, Tua Tagovailoa, or Trey Lance?
Yeah, I mean, leading off the show saying Trey Lance is the most likely guy outside of the top 12 to finish as a top 5 quarterback. Trey Lance is going to be the guy that you're going to hold in this situation. So narrowing it down to Zach Wilson and Tua, it really comes down to, first off, how's the league evaluating them? Because if you've got somebody in your league that, maybe somebody's holding that Garrett Wilson there or that Elijah Moore, and they want that stack with Zach Wilson, or maybe somebody has Tyreek Hill and they want to stack that with Tua. Those are the first choices where I would shop those types of things. And depending on where that value is, I mean, the real answer is whoever's going to give you the most on these 2 guys, because I don't know that you see either of them playing long-term over Trey Lance on your team. If I were to pick between the 2 of them, I would get off Zach Wilson, to be honest with you. I think you make a very compelling point for Tua, and I understand that his trade value might be the highest right now. I'm not convinced Zach Wilson is good. And so that kind of opens that up, that if you have that asset that's going to lose value rapidly, because if Zach Wilson doesn't play well this year with the way everything is set up there in New York, it's going to be the exact same situation as Tua. They're going to move on too. And like, I could see Jimmy Garoppolo moving in and being a perfect complement. Jimmy Garoppolo feels like a Jets quarterback. And if this ship is sinking, Robert Saleh feels like he's going to get fired. I think they could go back to that well and get a veteran guy that can right that ship a little bit. And I don't think Zach Wilson has a long leash. And so when I look at talent, I think Tua is a more talented quarterback between him and Zach Wilson. So I would look to capitalize and move off Zach Wilson.
All right, I like it. Are you going to go with Trey Lance here, Vic, and just give Craig no answer whatsoever?
Oh, goodness. I mean, I'd rather keep, personally, I would try to keep Trey Lance, though you guys are beaming about him this entire episode, right? So there are a lot of people that are very, very, very high on Trey Lance still, which is, again, a lot to me, because we don't know what the heck's going on over there with the 49ers. We still don't know what's going on with Jimmy G and Trey, and who's starting, etc. We've already covered that. If there is someone who's going to give you just a haul for Trey Lance, I would highly consider it. It would be a little scary, though, that you would be left with Zach Wilson and Tua as your only guys. So I understand why you wouldn't want to. Out of Wilson and Tua, you guys made really compelling arguments there. I think that, again, for me, whoever's going to be the easiest to sell. Is there a Dolphins fan there? They're high on Tua, that getting Tyreek just shot up his value for them. Is there someone that's really believing in Zach Wilson and that Elijah Moore, Garrett Wilson, et cetera, that they're building for the future? Whoever's having more value to get you that haul is who I'm going to sell. I like Zach Wilson more than Tua for the reasons Dave listed, and I won't relist them again. But yeah, I'm just worried about Tua's starting potential going forward after this year.
And you can make a strong argument for flipping Lance just because of how valuable he is right now, like you mentioned, where even if you're not a huge believer in Zach Wilson or Tua, by holding on to both of them, you're doubling your chances that at least one of them is going to hit, sort of, if that makes sense. And realistically, I mean, you can flip Trey Lance right now and get 2 firsts. And then, if Tua and Zach Wilson don't work out, maybe one of those firsts next year is a high first, or you can move up in the draft and get yourself one of these quarterbacks coming in. So really, I mean, this is a great question, because I feel like you can make a strong argument to sell any of these guys depending on how much risk you want to absorb and how you feel about the player evaluations on these guys. So that's a fun question, Craig. I do not envy being in your shoes, because you've got a tough decision to make there. Next question comes in from our friend Davis Pang, and he says, does Carson Wentz legitimately have the best wide receiver core of his entire career? Do you believe he takes it even further into a top 10 role currently being taken in the late 20s? And yeah, this is kind of wild right now. He pointed out we had to trim down the question a little bit, but Vic, correct me if I'm wrong. He said that he finishes the QB 14 last year, right?
Yeah, it was something like that. I think you're right, Dave.
Yeah,
Yes.
he finished just outside of QB1 contention, and now he gets realistically weapons upgraded around him, and here he is getting drafted as like the QB 26, 27. So, Victoria, do you think he's a value? Do you think he could take a step forward into the top 10, or do you think that's a little bit steep?
First, let's acknowledge he really finished at QB 14 overall. What? Yeah. Seeing that, this is just like the Kirk Cousins thing that he finished as QB 11 the last 2 years. It just doesn't feel. It's just not sexy. We want the sexy
Somebody's
guys.
going to come in and start talking about points per game and you just stayed healthy. And yep.
That's true. That's a very good point. But let's first acknowledge that the best wide receiver course of his entire career, Terry McLaurin. We're only talking about him, right? Because
Jahan Dotson.
Who else is out there? I mean,
Curtis Samuel.
Mills there.
Curtis
Still
Samuel,
nothing too inspiring.
When's the last time Curtis Samuel did anything? Oh, come on. I mean, yes, are we going to say that Terry McLaurin is more talented than Michael Pittman? Sure, I can say that in a vacuum right now. Let's see what Michael Pittman does this year. I'm very, very excited for that. Do we think he takes it further to top 10? I think Washington runs the ball a lot. I don't know if they're going to be – Carson Wentz isn't just some gunslinger that – when he gets into a really bad situation and he's down by 1 touchdown and there's only a couple minutes left and he's going to, throw that interception. Sure, that's when he's going to sling that gun. But I don't think he's that guy that they're going to put the ball in his hands to be winning these games every week in and week out, for him to be throwing often enough to get into this top 10 role. I will flip it the other way. I hope Terry finally gets into better contention in terms of fantasy points per game and all that, where we've been waiting for him to get, because Michael Pittman flew up there to relevance last year. So I have hope in the opposite way with Terry McLaurin. I'm not sure I'm banking on Carson Wentz being a top 10 guy this year, though.
And you kind of tiptoed around it a little bit, but I'll just flat out say it, Victoria. I don't think that Terry McLaurin is like substantially better than Michael Pittman. I think they're pretty level from a pure talent. And yeah, sure, you got a little bit of depth with maybe Jahan Dotson hits, maybe Curtis Samuel can rewind the clock, but I don't know if this is substantially better. So, I mean, I think the question, like, can he outperform his current value at QB 27? Sure, but like, are you going to feel that good if you draft him as QB 27 and he finishes as QB 22? Like, is that really a great investment? I mean, sure, in like a deep super flex league, maybe it helps you, but yeah, I don't think top 10 is within his range of outcomes. Jeff, I see you nodding along. Do you have anything to add to this?
So I go back, I think it's his second year in Philadelphia. There was a team, if you're going to count tight ends, he had prime Zach Ertz. He had Alshon Jeffrey came over there. He has Torrey Smith, who still had speed. And so I think that team probably pushes the weapons and Washington. I would probably put prime Zach Ertz at level, if not better than Terry McLaurin. And then you're adding Alshon Jeffrey with still some mileage on him. So I would probably go there. As for him outperforming in fantasy, I'm very out on Carson Wentz. He played very poorly the second half of last year, and they really had to compensate around him. They didn't really have another option to go to. And if you look at his passing numbers, it's something like week 10 or something like that. We were very, very high on Michael Pittman. He was doing great, and Michael Pittman just disappeared. Carson Wentz's numbers almost fell in half. They just stopped throwing the ball completely because he was a shell of himself. I would be more convinced that Carson Palmer's going to lose the job and we're going to go back to Taylor Heineke or maybe even Sam Howell than if he's going to outperform and be this great fantasy player that, kind of where we're sitting.
Yeah. Sam Howell, that's such a great point. Oh my goodness. Could you imagine? I don't know if I don't want to say I'd like to see that. That would be really, really interesting. But
normally I'd say like, hey, let's pump the brakes on the rookie fever because we're talking about all these, day 3 quarterbacks that are going to possibly, unseat the quarterbacks. But this was such a bizarre draft with the way the quarterbacks slid down. I mean, a lot of these guys had first round evaluations and just so happened to slide. And then a lot of these guys also fell into positions where they don't have great quarterbacks ahead of them. So there is a possibility that we see some switches here. And Sam Howell is one that, would take a lot of people by surprise, but really shouldn't if you've been paying attention. Now, the last couple of weeks, I just want to say we have had a ton of submitted questions and haven't had much time for the chat. Today, we cut down our submitted questions a little bit. We weren't pumping that out on Twitter nearly as much. So we got 2 questions left, and then we are headed to the chat. So we'll be there in just a few minutes. Already see some questions coming through, but be sure to keep dropping those. If you're watching the show on Periscope or Twitter, we can't see the questions coming through. We can't see in the chat. So you can go to the Football Guys page on Twitter, and from there, you'll see a link to the YouTube. You can go to the YouTube page, and you can join the chat from there. Anyway, next question comes in from Eric Reimer, and he says 16-team IDP where you keep 6 offenses and 8 defenses. Roster 2 quarterbacks. Wow, rostering 2 quarterbacks in a 16-team league. That is wild. 3 running backs, 4 wide receivers, 2 tight ends. Right now, I'm keeping Lamar Jackson, Aaron Jones, Leonard Fournette, Jamar Chase, and Kyle Pitts. I'm torn on my 6th keeper, Amari Cooper or Courtland Sutton. This one, for me, I am not even thinking twice. Courtland Sutton, very easily for me. I see both of you guys adding along. Do we need to go too deeply into this? I mean, Amari Cooper, they might have some similar evaluations right now, but with the pending news coming up on Deshaun Watson, it seems like there's no chance that man is stepping on a football field in 2022. So it's hard to get excited about a 28-year-old Amari Cooper catching passes from Jacoby Myers on a run first team. Jacoby Brissett on a run first team. I can't. I cannot get behind Amari Cooper at all this year. Victoria, you got anything to say about Amari Cooper, the Cleveland Browns?
No, I'm with you. And I'm always I want to hear all the arguments for Sutton, and this still for me was not even close. I'm not a Sutton truther. I like to tread lightly there, but this still isn't even close for me for all the reasons you listed. I mean,
if
the
Jerry
uncertainty
Jeudy
alone is wild.
Yeah. If Jerry Jeudy and Tim Patrick somehow pass Courtland Sutton up on the depth chart, I would still rather have Russell Wilson's wide receiver 3 than Jacoby Brissett's wide receiver 1. All right, we'll move on to the next one because I think we're all in agreement here. Let's hear it, Jeff.
Real quick, I just wanted to say that if you are in a position where you can make trades before the draft, that might be the one scenario where I might explore, because if this is a keeper with unlimited keeper years, unlimited keeper value, I'm seeing Leonard Fournette, who's kind of stepped into some immediate value right now, and there's a lot of buzz around Cortland Sutton. So if you're able to look around the league and maybe you've got somebody that's got a very weak sixth keeper, that's where I might try to look and see, can I move into a younger running back? Can I move into a younger wide receiver? Package these two guys, go reach out to your league man and say, hey, I see you're going to keep Rob Gronkowski or whoever it might be. Would you rather have Leonard Fournette and Cortland Sutton, and maybe you give me one guy back because you're going to lose value on that last guy? And so potentially explore that and move into a younger core along with Lamar, along with Chase, along with Pitts. Those are great pieces. That would be the one scenario that I would maybe not go with Sutton. But yeah, you guys hit it. If you're just looking straight up between Amari Cooper and Sutton, that's a pretty easy selection.
Yeah. We got
Really
Mr.
great
Scampers
answer,
in the
Jeff.
chat here giving me a hard time for saying Jacoby Myers instead of Jacoby Brissett. Jeff is able to say Carson Palmer instead of Carson Wentz, and nobody bats an eye, but God forbid I make a mistake. Huh. All right, last question, and then we're going over to the chat. Tyson Bowers, since the running back position has been devalued by the NFL, fewer running backs are being drafted on day 1 and day 2. Are Dameon Pierce and Zamir White pretty good? Well, I had to cut this a little bit because of the wording, and it doesn't make a lot of sense the way that I did that. But are Dameon Pierce and Zamir White in pretty good situations despite their lack of draft capital? Obviously, for people that weren't paying attention, both of these guys were round 3 picks. Dameon Pierce went to the Houston Texans. Zamir White went to the Las Vegas Raiders. Victoria, walk us through this one. It's a little bit conceptual here, but you know, are we starting to look at draft capital a little bit differently now that we no longer see first round running backs?
I really, really liked this question, and I like that it's not a black and white answer. And the last couple of years has been fun. We love to hype these rookie running backs because of that the sheer amount of production that we've gotten from them over the last 2 rookie running back classes. I mean, 2020 alone, 5 or 6 of them were viable fantasy starters. Last year was just as fun watching Javonte and Najee do their thing, and this is a great question. I mean, capital, to me, draft capital is only one piece of that puzzle. We've talked about this on the show before. Opportunity and talent kind of supersede capital to me in certain situations. Somebody like Brian Robinson, to me, who was drafted by Washington technically in the 3rd round, but was kind of a 4th round pick. Personally, to me, he's not just going to take over the backfield in week 1 for Washington just because some guy is mad that Antonio Gibson lost him a fantasy matchup because he had a toe injury 2 years ago. Like, that kind of mindset to me is just wild. But it's somebody like Isaiah Spiller, another later rookie running back. He's not going to come in and take Austin Eckler's role in Los Angeles. Breece Hall, right? He's going to be awesome. He's not a day 1 locked and loaded running back starter. In my eyes, I know you guys might feel different. He's going to be eased in. Obviously, though, definitely more quicker than his fellow rookies. But Pierce and White, I mean, these are guys we have to follow camp reports for, right? That's the best we're going to get. Similar to listening to, maybe we shouldn't be listening to the 49ers beat reporters, but listening to similar stuff like that. Pierce is really unique. He has such little competition for carries. He has fresh legs coming out of college. He's got Rex Burkhead and Marlon Mack. These are 2 names we all once loved years ago for fantasy, and now who are they, right? If he makes the most of his opportunity, then there's a massive opening there for that potential. That opportunity is there, and he's very talented. So that's where I like to say you get value on the draft board, in my opinion, in those situations. The Raiders, to me, is a little bit more murky. They look very full on paper this year for redraft. You got Josh Jacobs, Kenyon Drake, you got Brandon Bolden. I think that if they're not going to give Jacobs that bell cow work because they've seen how those injuries have impacted him from all that work, they'll mix him in, but I just don't see how there's going to be enough work there for that quality fantasy output in terms of that. But yeah. What do you guys think? I love this question so much.
And I'll just say, people that are projecting a bell cow workhorse role for Josh Jacobs, just come back to reality. It's not going to happen. Josh McDaniels has been the offensive coordinator for the Patriots. Everyone talks about how frustrating Bill Belichick is with running backs. This has so much more to do with Josh McDaniels than it does with Bill Belichick. there's no chance Josh Jacobs is going to come out here and be a 3-down back. He might get some early work or early down work. He might get some goal line work, but I would be shocked. We saw him catch some passes last year, and that's what has people really excited this season. But they're going to find somebody to take on that passing down role this season, and it's not going to be Josh Jacobs. So I just want to tell people right now, pump the brakes on the Josh Jacobs bell cow work, because it's just not going to happen. But Jeff, over to you. Same question.
So some of it is foundational understanding of how the NFL draft works. And when you're in that round one, teams are looking for star players that can contribute in the passing game. So they're really targeting quarterbacks, wide receivers, left tackles, edge rushers, and cornerbacks is where they really want to go in round one. So it says more about a running back that does go in round one than it does about a running back that doesn't go in round one, because you're looking at, if a team is willing to take a running back in round one, that means they're willing to have a major role in the offense, involvement in the passing game, and be an all-around player. We've seen plenty of talented players. We just saw Breece Hall fall to round two, because that's kind of where you fall more into the meat and potatoes portion of your draft, where you're looking for, you really want to hit starters on day two, and you're kind of looking more like, that's where you might get interior linemen. That's where you might get interior defensive linemen. That's where you might get a linebacker or safety or a running back. And so I'm not overly concerned about running backs moving out of round one, because conceptually it's very easy to see why that's happening, and it's very easy to see why teams value that. Now, when
I just saw. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, I saw Cooper recently, Cooper Adams on Twitter. He just did a little study where he said that a round 3 running back has a better hit rate of producing a top 24 season than a round 2 wide receiver does. So like you said, I mean, early in the draft, that's when they're reaching for the players that are at more important positions. And a little bit later in the draft, you can get running backs that are going to churn out pretty good production.
Well, yeah, because you're comparing, you get 7, 6, 7, 8 wide receivers going in round one versus 1 or 0 running backs going in round one. You get 2 or 3 running backs in round two, while you're still kind of taking those wide receivers in round two. So you're getting a lot more talented running backs falling to round 3. I don't really buy into draft capital so much on running backs in the current season. And I look at both of these guys with Pierce and Zamir White. There's new regimes there. There's new coaches there, and they brought those guys in. And so that kind of says something to me, that they saw a weakness in that backfield. They targeted a skill set, and that's what they went out and to address. And so these both are very talented backs. And so being a day 3 pick or being a 4th round running back, I'm not very concerned on that. Where I do look at it through a dynasty lens is, we just saw this year where Michael Carter was a 4th round running back. Everybody felt great about him in dynasty leagues, and surely they can't do anything else. They go around and take Breece Hall. And so I'm telling you, I'm a little bit of a Devy guy, get into the college football a little bit, and there's a handful of running backs coming next year that could push to be those 1st round running backs. And so, there's a guy kind of around you, Victoria, where Bijan Robinson down there in Austin, Texas, who might look pretty good in a Houston Texan uniform if Damian Pierce is not a world beater, and they're kind of looking to build around Davis Mills. So that's one area that I would look at. I would feel good about them potentially rising and elevating into a role this year, should they show that talent through the preseason camp, through the season. As injuries mount, they're going to get opportunities. They're going to touch the ball, but building your dynasty team around those, and that's a little bit of dynasty advice, I would kind of look to kind of move those guys and get more capital, especially after the year where teams are feeling really good about, oh, well, there's Damian Pierce. He was the breakout for the Texans, and he's still a 4th round pick. And that's where capital weighs a little bit more in my mind, that if he doesn't look like a great running back, then there's always going to be an opportunity that they're going to replace him.
Yeah, and we just see this time and time again. We saw it with Jordan Howard. He had 2 very formidable seasons, and then he was replaced by David Montgomery. James Robinson, 2 very good seasons, and then replaced by Travis Etienne. And these guys with draft capital, they don't typically last that long when you see these guys in the later rounds. And, 3rd round isn't quite as late as the guys that I'm talking about, but there's a little bit more risk with them. And the last thing I'll say about this is Damian Pierce. I understand people are getting excited about him because he's in a backfield where he can take the lead, but we're talking about a team that's probably going to win 2 to 4 games here. I mean, do you really want a running back that isn't going to catch a lot of passes on a team that's probably only going to win a few games? I mean, sure, he might have a handful of boom weeks here, but they're going to be very, very difficult to predict. If I'm investing in the Houston Texans offense at all, it's in the passing game. Give me some Davis Mills. I'll sprinkle in some Brandon Cooks, obviously, who was just a lock for 80 catches and 1,000 yards every single season. And then throw some darts at Nico Collins and Mechie and Brevin Jordan and some of those guys. But it's really hard for me to rally behind this run game in Houston. But anyway, that does it for the pre-submitted questions. So now we are going to go to the chat. But before we do that, I just want to make sure that you have signed up for Underdog Fantasy today, if you have not already. This year, they have upped the prize pool in their best ball contest to $10 million total dollars. And in addition to the best ball tournament, they've got these sit and go best ball drafts with entry costs as low as $3. We know that the best part about fantasy football is drafting. And at Underdog, that's all you have to do. In their best ball scoring format, you draft a team and that's it. Underdog will score the optimal lineup for you every single week of the season. And in addition to these best ball leagues, you can play in Pick'em for NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, PGA, and even more. They've got over-unders and rivals for tonight's matchups, and you can win up to 20 times your money in a single night. Obviously, some regional restrictions apply, but if you sign up for Underdog today with promo code FootballGuys, you will get a 100% deposit match up to $100. So absolutely be sure to check that out. Now let's go ahead and dive into the chat questions, starting off with, I'm not going to read this one, but the name and the question they have is, which Moore has more upside, Elijah Moore or Sky Moore?
Come on. For this year, we need to know, are we going to be talking this year alone? Let's stick with that.
Yeah, this year. Who's got more upside?
Goodness gracious. I love me Elijah Moore for this year. We have been chanting for him for so long. His ADP right now, I'm about to look it up. It's a travesty. He's going way, way, way too low. This kid was finishing. He had a stretch last season when he was healthy where he was, the number one wide receiver for a couple weeks in fantasy points. I mean, the upside, we already saw the upside. That's the thing. We've seen what he can do. And I don't know why a guy like this' ADP is falling or is so low at this point in time.
I mean, that's why. I don't agree with it. That's why.
Really? Just Garrett Wilson, you think?
I just want to know what happened. I thought the conversation was Elijah Moore or Rondale Moore. Now all of a sudden we got Sky Moore in the mix too. What about Rondale? We just chopped liver. We completely forgot about him.
We could talk about Rondale, but is there a lot to talk about? I mean, didn't he have a negative
A dot? Yeah.
Yes, negative A dot last year.
But I got to say, I envision him stepping into the Chase Edmonds role. Everybody's talking about him getting more targets. I'd love to see him in a role where he gets a little more touches. I mean, I feel like that's what he's built for. All I want to say about Sky Moore, obviously he's a wide receiver, but this feels so familiar to Clyde Edwards-Helaire all over again. Like, when are we going to stop falling in love with every single skill player that goes to Kansas City? Like, Clyde Edwards-Helaire burned us. Sammy Watkins burned us. And here we are, sipping the juice again with Sky Moore. I mean, he's a very good player, but with Juju Smith-Schuster, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, Justin Ross over there, I mean, there's a lot of people that can step up, and I don't know if Sky Moore is going to be able to beat them all out. Jeff, what do you have here? Elijah Moore, Sky Moore. Who do you think has more upside?
I mean, Sky Moore has more upside. Sky Moore is tethered to Patrick Mahomes. I know, Dave, you're very concerned about the age cliff coming for Travis Kelce. There's a chance that Sky Moore steps in right away and is Patrick Mahomes' number one wide receiver. I mean, that upside blows Elijah Moore's upside out of the water. And yes, I agree. I hear where you're coming from, but I think that Sky Moore is a much more athletic, explosive player than Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And so, yeah, that's kind of where I land there. And I'm willing to buy in on that. Now, if I'm not certainly going to rank Sky Moore ahead of Elijah Moore. I think Elijah Moore's a safer player at this point in time. But if you're betting solely on upside, one guy has a chance to be Patrick Mahomes' lead target, and one guy has a chance to be Zach Wilson's lead target. Who has more upside?
That's fair. Yeah, if we're talking pure upside, I guess you can make the case for Sky Moore. But yeah, I mean, I guess that's what the question was. So fair enough, Jeff. I'll agree with you on that one. Doug Deacon is asking us here, speaking of Atlanta, does Tyler Algier or Damien Williams take the lead running back role in Atlanta? Oh my goodness. It's Mike Davis and Javian Hawkins all over again. Jeff, who's got an opinion on this? I am in the camp that I think that they bring in a veteran. I said the same thing last year when they had this weird situation with Quadre Olison and whoever. And then, I mean, I thought somebody was going to show up. And if you remember, Wayne Gallman signed there, and I thought he was going to be the guy. Deonta Foreman had a cup of coffee there, and I thought Deonta Foreman was going to be the guy. And Then it ended up being their wide receiver, Cordero Patterson. I mean, I don't know what to expect this year, but I'm not putting a lot of stock in Algier or Damien Williams.
Can we frame
Victoria?
the question too in the sense of, will either of these guys have fantasy value if I almost said Cortland Sutton? Oh my goodness gracious. I need more caffeine. If Patterson is still taking that role, I don't see how he's a 29-year-old breakout, right? That was wild. I don't see it happening just as it did last year. We saw him slow down in the second half of the season. But if he does kind of take a little bit more of that role than the second half, do these two guys even have a chance for fantasy value week in and week out? Is more kind of, I'm less concerned of who's going to take over the lead role, because we've already talked about a team like the Texans. It didn't matter who had the lead role. David Johnson, we weren't trying to play David Johnson week in, week out last year, no matter if he had the role or not. So I'm more concerned of, will these guys actually have any fantasy value with Patterson still obviously having some kind of role in this offense this year? I don't know if
that's the problem. Is Patterson last year, he wasn't an every down back, but he was getting those premium touches. Like Mike Davis was getting the work between the 20s, and then as soon as they got to the goal line, because of Patterson's versatility, they'd plug him in, and it just made Mike Davis completely worthless for the entire season. So I'm kind of with you. Off on a little tangent here. Did you see that Sleeper removed wide receiver eligibility for Cordero Patterson? He no longer has that dual eligibility. He is running back only, despite reports coming out of Atlanta that they want him playing wide receiver more. Sleeper just went the complete opposite direction. And I mean, that nukes his value. That's what made him so valuable, was the flexibility you had in your lineup. So now if he just has that running back, I'm not a fan. Jeff, what do you think here, though? Tyler Algier or Damien Williams?
Well, first off, with Patterson, he had to transition to that. One, he got hurt in the middle of the season, and he was toughing it out, but he had to transition to that running back role, and he had to leave that other role because Mike Davis was so bad, they had no other option. They were trying to play Codroy Olson. That didn't work. We mentioned Wade Gallman. They really had nothing else at running back, and they were a lost team just trying to make it through the season. They almost stopped running the ball completely the second half of the season. So that's kind of where he shifted. I think he's going to shift back more into that early season role that allowed him to get matched up on linebackers in the pass coverage. And that's what they were really searching for. And that's why he was really able to break out. Now, between these two backs, I do think there's going to be a little bit of rotation. And I think that Damien Williams could be the early hot hand, especially depending on who wins that quarterback job. Because if they go with Desmond Ridder, the rookie quarterback, they might want that experienced running back. And Damien Williams is no slouch. Damien Williams broke out in that Chiefs Super Bowl. Now, that was forever ago and a lifetime ago, and so much has happened since then. And Damien Williams, he was on your Bears last year, Dave, and really Khalil Herbert just played so well that he put him on the bench. And so that doesn't really speak to Damien Williams' abilities. It was his first year back after sitting out a full year. Now his second year back, he should have fresh legs. That's kind of where I'm leaning there. I think the value on Damien Williams, he's worth grabbing as a last round. Tyler Algier, there's a little bit more rookie buzz on him. And that's one a little bit more is Mike Davis in my mind, just because I don't know that Tyler Algier is a special player. And I don't know if he's going to get involvement in the passing game. So that could be in an Atlanta offense that's not going to have a lot of goal line opportunities. Tyler Algier feels like the fool's gold because of where he's going to get drafted in your draft. Whereas Damien Williams feels like the very last pick you could make and throw a dart at there. And maybe you get a running back that you can fill in for injuries, or, maybe you get even more.
Yeah. It's a tough backfield to make sense of right now, but hopefully we get a little bit more clarity as the offseason progresses. We got another question coming in here saying, I'm in a 12-team Superflex, 4-point touchdown, half-point PPR. Who do you take at 107? I haven't seen a rookie draft question in a while. This is fun. Who do you take at 107? Kenny Pickett to pair with Trubisky as my QB3 or Chris Olave? I'm taking Olave here. That's pretty easy for me. See everyone nodding? All right, yes, we are in agreement here. We got another question from the same user saying, Fields' current pick value in a 12-team Superflex 4-point touchdown is Fields worth 2 firsts? Depends on the year, whether it's 22 or 23. I mean, I think you got to get. I wouldn't trade Justin Fields for any less than 2 first-round picks.
If that's the lens he's coming from, meaning unless it's would you give 2 firsts? I guess I'm not sure which way he's going here. Would you give 2 firsts for Fields?
I think he's just asking for value overall. I don't know if it's giving or getting, but I think 2 firsts is pretty fair, but realistically, I'd probably want a little bit more than that if I'm moving Justin Fields.
I think there's a lot of players
Yeah.
in Dynasty that fall into weird pockets where you would want to give a second to get them, but you really want a first back. And I think that Fields probably lands there where if you're acquiring him, you'd want to give up a first and maybe a little extra, where if you are trading him away, you want at least two ones, just like you mentioned, Dave. There's just these really weird pockets in Dynasty, I think, in value sometimes.
Yeah, the selling and buying markets are usually very, very different. Oh, we got another question in here from Mr. Scampers. And then if anyone wants to drop any more, we got a few minutes left before we'll wrap up here. And Mr. Scamper says, which Colts wide receiver do you like behind Michael Pittman? Alec Pierce is popular, but Paris Campbell, I don't even Strachan. I don't know who that is. And then Doolin. I mean, it's looking bleak once you get past the once you get Michael Pittman here. Paris Campbell is a guy that I have loved year after year after year ever since he came into the league, but has he ever played more than 5 games in a season? I mean, that dude he just lives on the IR, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I like Alec Pierce just because he's been getting a lot of buzz. Victoria, who do you like behind Pittman?
I'm looking up ADPs because I'm very, very curious to start there. So Doolin's at wide receiver 28. I'm looking for Pierce is wide receiver 65. So almost double the, obviously, ADP there for goodness gracious. It's got to be Pierce. I mean, we've got all the rookie hype going on. Dave, you've already mentioned you can't trust Paris Campbell. You can root for him outside of fantasy football as much as your little heart desires, but do not make that mistake in terms of wasting any kind of draft capital there. I mean, not that you would in redraft, but I do like Alec Pierce. I think that, again, though, with Pittman being the number one guy, I'm not sure how much fantasy value we're going to get out of Pierce this year. Especially, we got to keep reminding ourselves rookie wide receivers take a little bit of time to acclimate. Although, again, we've been spoiled over the last couple of years, but with a guy like this, I think he's going to need a little time to acclimate. And there's the guys going around Alec Pierce right now. You've got Rondale Moore, DJ Chark, Van Jefferson, Jamison Crowder, George Pickens, Marvin Jones, Jalen Tolbert even going after Alec Pierce is someone who I'd probably be targeting over Alec. And I know we're not talking about that, but if I'm looking at ADP, there's a couple guys I'd like over Pierce there. I think he's going a little high because we love to hype up these rookies around this time of year. Other than Pittman,
I checked our ADP here. We go 150 wide receivers deep, and Mike Strachan isn't even on that list. So a little embarrassed not to know an NFL player. I feel like I should know them all, but that's a deep pull, Mr. Scampers.
He was a rookie last year. He's a bigger wide receiver. I think he's closer to 6'4", 6'5". He got hurt last year, and so he didn't really get involved. Yeah, I mean, out of these guys, you have to go with Pierce just because of the immediate value. I do want to mention, I really like Ashton Doolin. I think that Ashton Doolin's a very talented wide receiver. I could see him kind of being the Olamide Zaccheaus in this offense, and with Matt Ryan coming in and being that smaller, that faster wide receiver and using him in that role, stretch the field vertically. I think that Doolin is a name that worth mentioning.
Yeah. And the thing is, we saw Carson Wentz, who has always had a penchant for kind of finding one guy that he really likes to hyper target, and he did that last year with Michael Pittman. Matt Ryan is just such a better quarterback. He's going to spread that ball out a little more. And I think that's why so many people are jumping on the Alec Pierce train, just because, everyone assumes that he's going to be the wide receiver too, but there could be somebody else that steps up here. The kind of dark horse that I like to catch a lot of passes in Indianapolis isn't listed on here at all, but Nyheim Hines. We saw 2 years ago, all they were doing was checking down in Atlanta. 2 years ago when Phillip Rivers was the quarterback in Indianapolis, Nyheim Hines had a fantastic season as a pass catcher. And then Carson Wentz came down. He checks down at a lower rate than almost any quarterback in the league. Nyheim Hines was all of a sudden just completely forgotten about. Now here we are with Matt Ryan, who loves to check down again. We saw what he did last year with Patterson and Mike Davis in the passing game. So Hines is a guy that I like to, realistically could see 70 or 80 targets this year, and it wouldn't shock me one bit. But anyway, that does it for today. We did it. Almost full hour here, so we're going to go ahead and log off. I want to thank everybody for checking out another episode of the Football Guys Mailbag Show. If you haven't already, subscribe at youtube.com/footballguys. I am Dave Kluge, and I'm here with Jeff Bell and Victoria Geary. We will be back next week and every week, Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, youtube.com/footballguys. We'll see you next week.